1 Samuel 7 and 8. We're told in chapter 7, verses 3 and 4, and this is a bit predictive based on how bad the times were in the days of the judges, that the word of Samuel to the people was to put away the gods of the foreign nations and to serve only Yahweh, emphasis again on the one God idea, which Elohim. What's interesting in verse 13 is that it says that all the days of Samuel, they did this. And so that's good news, but it's also kind of bad news in the sense that when the writer, whoever wrote 1 Samuel, we're not sure who wrote it, looking back upon this story, writing probably several hundred years later, looking back, when you say this, it implies that there's going to be an ominous turn in events, right? Because Samuel's ministry basically ends at the beginning of chapter 9, which is our next day's reading. So what happens then in chapter 8? This is where things turn. The people say, people of Israel, we want a king as the other nations have a king. What they're asking for is a permanent display of power in their country so that they can compete against these other nations that have been around, for centuries. Well, what Samuel does, he uses that idea, and he, again, with some ominous prophecy almost, he says, well, if you want a king like the other nations, here's what you're asking for. And the way that we can appreciate this is simply look at the other nations in history and notice what these kings were like. Just several things. Imagine giving a person limitless power. And again, we're very spoiled in America because every 4 years we restart, right? Imagine it never ending. The kings of the ancient world thought in terms of divine sanction. What I mean by that is that there was no separation of church and state, shall we say, that a king believed, especially in these other nations, that their authority descended from the heavens and that they were really God's gift to mankind and their nation. That's how they functioned, which is a very dangerous thing. Imagine a person who does not put their hand on the Bible, as it were, and promise to follow a constitution, but who just says, I will personally be the sole proprietor of law and order. A standing army gets very expensive. Stabling horses can be even more expensive when you start putting all the numbers together, but that would be part of what you're getting with a king. Taxation, where now you are going to be paying for not just one person, but an entire administration. In fact, Samuel warns them that you're going to have perfumers to pay for, and books, or cooks, and bakers, and all that sort of thing. Again, very eerily predictive of what a king would do. Your land could be confiscated at any time. Again, these are things that will happen, and the writer is telling us through the words of Samuel, here is what we will expect in the days ahead. All right, well, let's get ready now for our next reading in chapter 9. That will be the beginning of Saul's story. Samuel and Saul have never met, and so we're waiting for that in chapter 9. What I'd like you to do in your reading of the life of Saul, chapter 9 and forward now, is to ask a question that is a very simple question, but I have never heard of it being asked in any of the reading I've done over the years and the teaching I've listened to on this, on any Old Testament storyline. I want you to ask this question: was Saul a Yahwist? Very simple question, but it will have amazing effect on the direction of this story.